And welcome in to SportsZone All Access. It is Friday, September 5th, and it is our 24th episode. And Ian Sachs, Grant Sweeter here, and it is a football Friday here in KELOLAND.
Yeah, it is, Ian. A lot of excitement here, too. And for those of you that may not have noticed, Ian and I have switched sides of the desk. And so Ian is directing his first time here on KELOLAND Plus. So, if there's any problems, let him know. No, I'm just kidding. But no, it's exciting, to talk about Football Friday. We're going to go through all 7 classes today, and we're going to have to do it kind of quick, Ian, because you know how easy it is to talk about all the good stuff coming up tonight.
Yeah, so much to get into, and let's, dive right into it. We'll start in the biggest class, and that is 11 AAA. And Grant, you mentioned tonight, but it's not tonight. It's a lot of these games tomorrow in the state's biggest class, as you see them right here. The biggest matchup right at the top there, Lincoln and O'Gorman playing Saturday at noon, 1 versus 4.
Yeah, Rapid City Central is actually the only team, Ian, in 11 AAA that's playing on Friday night. Everybody else is playing on Saturday, and that's because you have the Pigskin Classic going on over in Brandon as they take on Rapid City Stevens, and then you have the President's Bowl, which expanded from 2 games to 3 games this year, getting Harrisburg and O'Gorman involved in it, and I like that. I really do, and especially if you're going to put Lincoln and O'Gorman, that 1 versus 4 matchup. To me, that one's going to be fantastic. I'll be intrigued to see what Washington-Harrisburg looks like. Harrisburg had a tough loss last week, and I think Washington's better than people give them credit for, considering they played a really good Brandon Valley team. So I'm excited to see that one, but certainly I think the game of the week is the ranked matchup there at noon on Saturday.
And let's talk a little bit more about that Lincoln team. And the Patriots have put up a ton of points so far this season. We knew that their offense was going to be potent. It's the defense that was the big question mark surrounding this team, but they've looked every bit like the 2-time reigning state champions and the number 1 team so far.
Yeah, no question. And this is a team that put up 62 points, and you may say, oh, that's impressive. They scored 5 touchdowns a minute into the second quarter. So they can score as quick as anybody, and that's going to be something that does happen on Saturday. They're going to score points. O'Gorman's not going to shut them out. O'Gorman's not going to try to shut them out. O'Gorman's job is can we hold them to 5 touchdowns, and if we can we score on that inexperienced defense? I'm excited to see how that defense for Lincoln looks, considering that they did well against Stevens. Now they're going to turn it up a little bit and face a really good O'Gorman team.
Yeah, the level of competition, that's a big thing to keep in mind. And this is a matchup that we saw in the state championship game just a year and a half ago, 2 seasons ago, and it was a tight game there, so it'll be really interesting to see what kind of fight O'Gorman can do, a good measuring stick for the Knights as well, not only talking about it from the Patriots side. But let's move down 1 class to 11 AA, and we'll start off there with the game of the day, probably Pierre versus Watertown, 5 versus 2. We saw Watertown last week. They played up a class. They played Jefferson. Now they move back to 11 AA, and welcome to the schedule for the Arrows that now they get the number 2 team in their class in Yankton.
Yeah, this is a tough schedule for Watertown. And they got to go, they got to go on the road to Yankton. And so that's not an easy place to win either. Long drive down there. And I like that T-Area Aberdeen Central game too, if we're going to bring up that. But yeah, Yankton, Watertown just got a bad draw. They got to play Jefferson, who they're big, man. They're big. They return so many skill players. I think they might have the best offensive mind in the state in Eric Struck now. It was tough for Watertown. Now they're going to have their hands full with Yankton, who put up a lot of points in Huron last week. But yeah, I also like that T-Area Aberdeen Central game too. I mean, there's a couple good ones this week in the ranked matchups. And for T-Area, I got to see them last week. Their defense looked really good. And kind of an interesting note, Brenner Conrad, their quarterback, got banged up last year a little bit. They said he's returning. He's our starting quarterback. And that's what Scott Fry told me at Media Day. And I get there, and he's not. Mitch Grant's the starting quarterback, and Brenner Conrad's the running back. And he was great, and Brenner did great, but not the point. He tricked me a little bit there. He might have tricked the whole state and said, hey, we're going to go with Brenner. You see him running the ball right here. He's a big dude that's running the football, and T-Area loves to run the football. So,
well, it makes their offense so much more dynamic when you have Conrad, who can play both positions there in the backfield, quarterback and running back, and it really keeps the defense on their toes and guessing. T-Area ranked number 3 in this week's media poll, and it'll be interesting to see how they shake up, especially after we see what happens in that Watertown-Yankton game. Here, of course, taking on Huron. The Governors looking every bit the part so far of a team on a mission to get back to the Dome once again, but it'll be interesting to see how T shakes out there in 11AA. Moving down one more class to 11A, and we'll look at the ranked matchups here. The Christian Bowl in Sioux Falls Christian taking on Rapid City Christian, Custer, and Lennox. The game of the night, though, probably that 3 versus 4 Madison versus Del Rapids, our KELOLAND game of the week.
I like that Dakota Valley Canton game as well. It'll be a good one. But yeah, obviously, we knew Del Rapids Madison was going to be a really good game. That's why we put it on our game of the week radar. It's why, Ian, that's why you get to go there tonight, right? You get to go up to DSU's beautiful stadium that they have up there and call that game with Del Rapids and Madison. I like that game. They both rolled pretty well last week. Sioux Falls Christian rolled West Central. I think that was a little surprising, just because West Central is such a name. But I think they're down a little bit this year, and they showed that, especially for Christian, who lost several players and still bounced back the way that they did. Christian's got a defense, a legit defense. The one that really surprised me was Lennox. They made a quarterback change last week and went from Huntington to Halls, and Halls looked really good and interesting. I was at the game. I actually don't have any video of the new quarterback, the sophomore that came in, because I had to leave at that point. They brought him in, and he threw a big touchdown pass right out the get-go and figured it out. So Lennox got to travel all the way out to Custer. They're still the defending state champs. I found it interesting in this week's poll, Ian, that Sioux Falls Christian gained more votes in the number 1 spot, even though both Christian and Lennox looked pretty good last week.
I think you mentioned it with the way that Christian defeated West Central. Even though if West Central's a little down, you mentioned that when you talked about that game, they're the name. They are one of the premier names in this class, and the fact that what Christian did, shutting them out and looking really dominant, makes a lot of sense. It'll be fun to see how Lennox and the rest of that top of Sioux Falls Christian and Madison and Del Rapids all shake out the rest of the season.
Well, and let me put this in the back of your minds. You got Custer and Lennox tonight. You got Sioux Falls Christian, Rapid City Christian. I don't know how those will go. But if they hold up the way that the rankings would say, next Friday, Bob Young Field, Sioux Falls Christian hosting Lennox, 1 versus 2, and it's on Kelo Extra and KELOLAND.com and KELOLAND Plus. So we got 2 potentially really great ranked 11A games back-to-back weeks.
Yeah. Well, enough about 11A. We can go on a lot about them. Let's move down to 11B now and looking at no ranked versus ranked matchups here for the first class that we're seeing that so far. And Elk Point Jefferson, the top-ranked team, taking on Mount Vernon Plankinton. Interesting. All 5 of the ranked teams on the road this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's interesting. And you got Winter and Hot Springs played to a really close game week 1. Now Wagner's got to go out there, right? Hot Springs got a little bit of a tough schedule going on out there. Elk Point Jefferson, Mount Vernon Plankinton, we got a photographer going there tonight. I look forward to that game. St. Thomas More, and I'll say it, they've been my number 1 team the last 2 weeks. They beat Sioux Valley, they beat Mount Vernon Plankinton, they beat them both by multiple scores. They've been the most impressive team to me so far. I like Winter at Groton area. That'll be a fun one. Groton's always a little sneaky, and it's their homecoming up there. And then Sioux Valley's, they're still trying to get the ship righted, but really like what I'm seeing from Elk Point right now. And that's only having seen them for a week, Ian. They put up 60 points on Parker and then had a bye week. So Elk Point Jefferson just getting their feet wet into their second game of the season. Yeah,
looking really good. And kind of interesting that you think about how it's just the second week for the 3 biggest classes, but it's also the second game week now for Elk Point Jefferson. Yeah. So they're kind of playing on a different timetable from the rest of the class as well. But if they're looking at anything like they did in week 1, watch out for the rest of the class.
Yeah, they rushed for I think they had 3-4 rushers go over 100 yards. So yeah, they have some talent down there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, 4 classes down, all the 11-man classes down. When we come back, we'll talk 9-man football and look at the schedule ahead for those 3 classes. You're watching SportsZone All Access here on KELOLAND Plus. Block number 2 here on this Football Friday. Ian Sachs alongside Grant Sweeter. We talked all 4 classes for 11-man football. Let's dive into the 3 9-man classes now. We'll start off in 9AA and another ranked matchup here. To start things off, it's number 3, Freeman Marion Freeman Academy hosting Elkton Lake Benton. Grant, I think that's got to be the game of the night for 9-man football.
You know it is, and beware of Elkton when they play 3 third-ranked teams. They beat a third-ranked team by 43 last week. So, and give Freeman Marion Freeman Academy credit. They're playing some really good football right now. I've been really impressed with what the Phoenix have been doing lately. And then you look across the rest of the games. Viborg Hurley looking to bounce back after a bad loss last week. Hill City is home. We're going to have highlights of that game. Tyler Louder, our reporter out there, is going to head over there. And then Hamlin's got a game against Waubay Summit, a little bit easier than when they had to go to Hanson last week and play in a tight one there. But right now, the Elks look like the team to beat.
Yeah, Elkton Lake Benton solidifying themselves, I would say, as the number 1 team at this point in this season. Now, granted, we're 2 weeks into the season, but what they have done throughout the first 2 weeks of the season, really impressive.
It is. And for me, I knew they were going to be good. I was a little surprised because I voted Hamlin preseason number 1. And I heard,
so did I.
And I heard Elkton's going to be really good, right? And I'm like, I know they're going to be good, but Hamlin's got some talent back. They got the Wadsworth kid back. They have a winning tradition there. They'll be all right. And then Elkton opens up the year with a good win. I was like, okay, great. Good for them. They put up 50 on Waubay Summit. Then they turned around and beat a really good Viborg Hurley team by 43. And that opened my eyes. Colt Beck is the real deal. He's one of the best players in 9-man football. And we're going to have highlights of him tonight on KELOLAND Sports Zone. Don't miss those.
What I think really interesting, the way that Viborg Hurley put up a 50-point blowout winning week 1. I know they're playing down against Canastota, right, but then they get blown out by almost an identical score against Elkton Lake Benton. That was an eye-opener for me, too, as well. But let's move down to 9A and look at the slate of games here. Wall number 1, they're in action. Warner number 2, Alcester, Hudson, Platte Geddes, and Howard rounding out the top 5. All 5 of the 5 ranked teams in action tonight.
Yeah, Platte Geddes and Howard both coming from the unranked ranks. It's kind of funny. And it is funny because it's like, to say Howard wasn't ranked last week is kind of surprising, but Alcester Hudson put a whooping on them that first week, and then they turned around and Howard beat up Esteline Hendricks really well. And this is an Esteline Hendricks team that beat Woolsey, and you're like, what is all happening here? You think Esteline's really good because they beat Woolsey really good? Well, then Howard turns around and beats Esteline. It's all over the place right now. What I do know is I'm really confident in the top 3. Wall put up over 70 points last week. Warner is legit, as they always are, right? They're just so fundamental. And then Alcester Hudson, they've played a really tough schedule, right? They had to play Howard the first game, and then they turned around last week, the video you're seeing here, and had to play Alec Austin, one of the best quarterbacks in 9-man football in Centerville, and beat them and held them to just a few points too. So this Cubs team can play some defense. I don't think it was us overestimating Howard in the first week. I think it was us underestimating how good Alcester Hudson is.
That's a really good point. I feel like they're a team that's always in the mix to be a top 5 ranked team. Mm-hmm. Every year you think about them of, okay, yeah, they're in the mix. They're one of the teams that can get to the dome, but they don't feel like a prohibitive favorite. And I feel like now they're starting to cement themselves as one of those teams of, hey, we're right up there with the Walls, with the Warners, that are the teams that are the bona fide favorites to get there. I know it's so funny. We're talking about getting to the dome, and it's
let's pump the brakes.
Couple days after Labor Day, but throughout the first 2 weeks, they're looking like one of the best teams in the class.
They're rolling so far.
All right, now one more class to go, and that is 9B. And here, not everyone in action. The number 1 team in Sully Butte's Idol this week, Avon, in action against Burke, and then Del Rapids St. Mary's take on Arlington. But how about that 4 versus 5 game, Harriet Selby area and Fulton area?
We're going to have highlights of the St. Mary's Arlington game. Arlington's undefeated in receiving votes, so keep an eye on that team up there. They got some talent. Burke is a team that I thought I like them this year. I think they're up from where they were last year. And then Sully Buttes came to town and hammered them. And so that was kind of a humbling moment. Avon looked really good against Sioux Falls Lutheran. That Harriet game, I'd love to have a reporter up there tonight. Unfortunately, we're not going to make it to Harriet, South Dakota. I think it's like a 4-hour drive. So unfortunately, we won't. But we will make it to that Del Rapids St. Mary's game. And I think that one for a 9B contest is the one we want to make it to, Ian. They're both undefeated. It's a battle of 2-0s. And the highlights we're looking at it from 2 weeks ago when St. Mary's rolled Oldham Ramona Rutland. I won't say it won't happen, but I don't foresee that happening tonight. I think we had a good game set to happen up in Del Rapids.
I agree with that. I think that you see what St. Mary's did last year, going all the way to the semifinals, and they were a team that I thought throughout the playoff run felt like one of the prohibitive favorites, one of the teams that really could win the state championship there in 9B. Didn't quite get to the Dome, but I say they carry that momentum. From what we've seen, they've been carrying that momentum into this season.
Well, and Lincoln LeBrun's a stud. Let's just put it that way. Tremere Hansen, their quarterback, he can fly. They got a couple of guys, and when you have a couple of guys, and then look at that size they got there. When you got a couple of guys that can lead block and a couple of studs that can run the football, that's how you win a 9-man football.
Yeah, all very true. I mean, it seems like that is the saying across all levels of football, but 9B in particular should be a really fun football Friday night. KELOLAND Sports Zone tonight at 10:15 on Kelo TV. But we talked high school football. Time to dive into college football when we return to SportsZone All Access. Welcome back into segment number 3 of our Football Friday. We talked high school. Now time to dive into the college ranks, and we'll talk D1 football, FCS level, and the Coyotes on the road again for week number 2 to start the season, and going down to Lamar, a little bit of an easier task than having to take on an FBS team in Iowa State from last week.
Yeah, we got a chance to talk Augustana and USF yesterday, and so now it's only fitting, and Northern State, I guess, yesterday, because that's where they're playing USF. We'll talk about that in a minute. But, yeah, I mean, and no slap at Lamar. You know, Kelsey and I talked about this earlier in the week is, you know, the toughest, and this is no slap at the FCS, the toughest opponent USD is going to play all year is a top 20 team from Iowa State. They're stud quarterback. They're stud all over the place, and so this is their chance to redeem themselves. The thing I'm looking forward to here, their offense going to be fine. Their defense. The coach said in his press conference, 8,000 career snaps last year in the secondary. This year, 0 starting snaps. So
wow.
They're really inexperienced. Maybe 8,000 was probably a little bit of an exaggeration, but that's where I'm looking forward to. The defense really struggled the other day. And I'm intrigued to see how they do today.
Iowa State scoring on all 9 of their complete possessions in that game. And, yeah, definitely a tough task for USD on both sides of the ball. Talking about a tough task, SDSU, 2 versus 3 in the FCS. The Jacks on the road at Montana State later on today. And, Grant, anytime you get this matchup, you know it's going to be a good one.
Well, it's funny how I'm going to flip the scripts here. I talked about how tomorrow, most thing I'm looking forward to for USD is to see how their defense gels together. I'm looking forward to see how SDSU's offense can gel together, right? Their defense was lights out the other day, last week against Sacramento State. How does their offense respond? They really struggled in the red zone. You know, numbers-wise, they should have beat them by 30. Well, it was almost a one-score game if Sac State catches that touchdown late. So, yeah, at the end of the day, I'm excited to see how Chase Mason and this offense keeps gelling. They're not going to be at their best this early in the season, but you're going to have to be pretty darn good when you got to face a talented team like Montana State.
Yeah, we always look forward to those matchups. When they played 2 years ago in Brookings, one of the best games of that season. Mm-hmm. The Jacks coming away with a tight victory, and see if they can do it again now out in Montana on the road. But those aren't the only big college games on the slate today, as we try to take a look at the schedule for today and looking at the rest of the calendar. We talked about the 2 FCS games, D2 as well, Augustana at home and USF Northern State. I know you're looking forward to that one.
Yeah, USF Northern State. We got it live on Saturday at 6 o'clock on KELOLAND Plus, KELOLAND.com. 6:30, Kelo Extra joins in progress too. And That'd be a great game. USF returned so much talent from last year, so we kind of know what they'll look like. Northern State has some new faces, so intrigued to see that game.
Yeah, should be a good one. Highlights from all the games coming up on the KELOLAND News at 6 and 10. Welcome into the final segment of today's show. And Grant, we talked all about the 7 classes in high school football. We talked about tomorrow's college football games. Now let's dive a little more into what we'll see on the KELOLAND Sports Zone today. A lot of games that we will be out covering tonight, and it should be an exciting one.
Yeah, it is, and it's our biggest show so far this year. We had 10 the first week, 12 second week, now we're up to 14. Maybe we'll get 16 next week. Probably not. I think 15 is a full show, if I remember right. I think we've done 16 before. You know how hard it is to do 16 games in a night? But we got 14. 14 is a great show, including some of the games you're seeing here. Yankton, Watertown, top-ranked matchup. Same with Madison, Del Rapids. Ian, you'll be in for a good one tonight on that call. That 9AA game, that's a game over in Freeman. And then, not even on this list, is West Lyon, Central Lyon. They're playing the Beef Bowl way early this season for some reason. So, got a couple of good Iowa games to go in there as well, and just a full slate of games, and a lot of excitement. And to go into that game of the week, too, Ian. 7 o'clock tonight. People better be tuning in to Kelo Extra, KELOLAND Plus, and KELOLAND.com. Should be a good one.
Yeah, really exciting. It's so amazing when we talk on Fridays that, we have so much to preview. We have the game of the week to preview. We have SportsZone to preview. We have all the college football action to preview. We have 2 games of the week on Saturday to preview. Yeah. A President's Bowl game this week and that Northern USF game Saturday night. So much to dive into. It. Grant, it was hard for the two of us to put this show together and say, okay, well, what are we going to spend more time on than other things? But yeah, looking at this schedule for the Sports Zone tonight, 3 ranked versus ranked games. I'm really looking forward to that Madison Dells game to get to go up to the DSU Stadium. Second year of that stadium. It was fun being up there last year, and we got to see the state champion in the game that night. Maybe we'll see the state champion there tonight.
Yeah, it sounds like with all the coverage we got coming up, you might want to just tune into the Sports Zone tonight and don't miss our games of the week and the news and all that. We got a lot of good stuff coming up over the weekend.
Yeah, well,
NFL starts too, by the way.
Oh, that's
already underway. Yeah.
How can we forget about all of that?
Chiefs play tonight, yeah.
But big Vikings on Monday, but a lot before we get to that. KELOLAND Sports Zone tonight, game of the week tonight, game of the week Saturday afternoon and evening as well. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of SportsZone All Access. He's Grant Sweeter. I'm Ian Sachs, and you have a great weekend.